Yeah, hello Matthias and hello everyone to our another version of our late night show with Power BI tools, development and TMDL and other stuff. Yeah,
Yes.
you're
Hi.
pretty. We've been pretty busy visiting all the events in the last weeks. Yeah, I've seen you at the Data Bash and you visit lots of more, but today it's not about the events, it's about TMDL.
Yeah,
Mhm.
um, exactly. I'm super excited. And yeah, you're right. There was a lot of travel lately. I'm slightly relieved that I'm spending a bit more time at home in London right now. Um, but yeah, let's look at Tyndall.
Yeah,
I
what's
thought
new? So it was a
that
great update in the beginning of this year, and then there was Fabric, and then there was lots
yeah.
of other stuff. The developer mode, which does not support Timber, and then yeah, I'm pretty excited to see what's new around Timber.
So basically, I've had on my agenda for a long time now to actually provide a little bit of a write-up of
Mm.
all the various Tyndall changes we've had, and just help everyone interested in Tyndall, with some extra documentation. I've finally gotten around to actually do that, and to be honest
Great.
with you. Since we've had quite a few incremental updates and releases since the very
Mm.
first one in April. Even for my own sanity, it was actually quite useful, sort of spelling things out a little bit. So let me share my screen and
Mhm.
show you what we have. I've got new glasses and I'm still very much getting used to them. So right now everything is completely blurry for me, which is
Oh,
not brilliant. So yeah, I'm basically half blind at the moment. So hopefully
okay.
you can see my GitHub screen. Yes, you can, absolutely.
Yes.
So I created this new public repo just earlier this afternoon for everyone, sort of as Timdo documentation, if you will. This is the URL under my personal account, and what I've done here is two things. Well, first of all, this README actually lists all 7 preview releases we've had so far. I can imagine that apart from myself, no one else is really keeping count. But that's one of the points, why I actually put this out here a bit more explicitly. So we've got the Tom version here, then we've got the corresponding Tyndall preview version. We've got the date when it was released. And over here, for reference, I also put the tabular editor version. This is tabular editor 2, so the free open source one, and the PBI tools version, which is aligned with those respective Tyndall previews. And that's actually quite important because we had some breaking changes between some of the previews. So if you want to switch between different tools, it's actually right now, whilst we're in preview, it's really important that you're aware which particular snapshot or flavor of Tyndall they actually support. There were a few support cases previously where people were struggling with incompatible versions, basically. So that's the reason we've got it all spelled out here. I also managed to publish some PBI tools updates last week, I think, bringing it up to speed with the latest previews and with the latest tablet editor version as well. So we can see we're currently preview 7, and the releases are generally monthly, as we can see. one thing I can already say is that we're expecting another release in December, preview 8, and that one is going to be really significant because it will have a very large number of changes in it, which obviously is not great in terms of breaking stuff, but the intent with that one is that it will be the very last one with breaking changes. So the one that's meant to come in December, I need to be careful here because it may well slip, but the one that's planned to come in December should be the final one in terms of language changes. That's also quite useful now for us to sort of look at where we're at today in early December, just so that with the next release, we have a bit more context. All right, so I've done this. And then the other thing I've done was to basically create an example model, which I haven't loaded yet, which is this one here. So that model is contained in here in the repo. And I've basically taken the exact same model and I've exported it into TMDL with every single previous TMDL preview, which means just looking at the commit history of that repo, we can actually see what's changed. So anyone actively working with TMDL projects and wondering why things may change between versions can actually use this repo as a neat reference and to understand why some things suddenly look different. The BIM project is a very artificial one. So this is one which you would not be able to deploy. Just to be really clear on that. It's a valid tabular project from a metadata point of view, but I sort of manufactured that in order for it to contain all possible sort of features of tabular model, right? And so this is very artificial, and it's merely here for us to actually see what the TMDL output is. So if you were to try to deploy that, it would fail because things just don't quite add up here. So just looking at what we've got here, there's a data source here, which obviously in Power BI we generally don't have. We've got perspectives, relationships, we've got roles and role members, shared expressions, different types of tables. We've got a date table here, we've got a calculated table, we've got field parameters, we've got calculation groups, and then we've got cultures and translations as well. So I pretty much threw everything which TMDL sort of needs to take care of in one way or another into this model, so we can actually see what that looks like and how things have changed. And the other thing I've done, again, for documentation purposes, if you go to pull requests in that repo and look at the closed ones, you're going to see one pull request dedicated to each previous TMDL release, which means if you, let's say we go to the latest one, the November release, preview 7, if we go to the pull request and look at files changed, we actually see very nicely side by side what has changed in the November release, which happens to be the one that's embedded in the latest tabular editor in the latest PBR tools version. Let me just start with that one because arguably this one had sort of the most significant breaking changes so far, although I'm anticipating that the next one, preview 8, will have even bigger breaking changes. So we can see, for instance, that if we're looking here, the limiter changed for this particular property. So previously we had the combined colon equals delimiter for certain types of properties. This is now changed to just a single, a simple equal. We can also see some changes with respect to ordering. Here, protocol is now showing first rather than last for connection details. This one is a very significant change. The latest preview actually has introduced an entire new file, which is database.tmdl. So all previous releases did account for database level properties, but they were embedded into the model object, even though technically the database is the parent of model. The original TMDL versions actually pretended or let's say serialized database stuff as if it were a child of model. Back then, there was a good reason for it, and I would probably still fight for it to be done that way, but higher powers did overrule, and so this is more aligned with the TOM structure. So this is new. Also, be really careful because Tabular Editor hasn't. So even though Tabular Editor technically uses the latest preview of TMDL, it hasn't accounted for this particular change. In fact, I created an issue with Daniel earlier to make him aware. So Tabular Editor right now does not export the database.tmdl file at all. It basically ignores it, which means you may be in a situation where you're actually losing, for instance, your compat level, right? Because compat level is held at the database. So just be aware and one takeaway whilst we're in preview is to always retain a BIM copy of your project, just because until we get to GA, there are various breaking changes, and so having a BIM means you've got a completely reliable interchangeable format that works with any tool out there, and you can always go back and forth. Okay, so we've got that. And this is actually where this becomes very apparent. So previously, compat level did show up as a model property when technically it was actually on the database. So now we can see that that's happening, right? Also, compat mode is something which previously TMDL never exported, whereas now we can actually see that on the in the new database file. And then this one, that's a big one, and unless someone was sort of following, how the TMDL output for their own project changed, I think no one is probably aware what's happened here. So this is an entire new syntax that did sneak into the last preview and is the new and only way for deterministic ordering. So again, TMDL originally had, if I go to a particular table, so TMDL originally had this way of ordering. It basically invented a new property called ordinal, which does not exist in the tabular object model. But it emitted tables, for instance, with an ordinal property, allowing us to put an explicit order on our tables when otherwise they would just show up either randomly or alphabetically, right? And so one of the drawbacks for that was that whenever you, for instance, inserted a new table into your collection of tables, all the subsequent tables obviously would have had a bump in their ordinal, right? They would all have gone up one or more than one. And so a very simple change, like just inserting one table could have had a knock-on effect on any number of tables, just because of how this bit of metadata was actually maintained. Whereas now, first of all, this ordinal property no longer exists. And secondly, we still have an explicit way of prescribing order, but we're doing it using the ref syntax. So basically, this is the model file, model.tmdl, and in that one, the internal table order is being documented by basically just referencing the various table objects. And that one, as you can see, doesn't apply just to tables. It applies to any object that is exported into a subfolder, which means tables, cultures, perspective, roles, and data sources. So that's new. And again, probably not widely known at all. Then, yeah, so this this is a minor change. Previously, for relationships, because properties were exported alphabetically, you always had no, actually, no, sorry, that changed. Hold that thought. That change is not coming until preview 8. All right. So then this is also new. Until this version, role members were never exported, whereas now they are actually part of TMDL. We also have a simplified reference for table permissions. So previously, as you can see in preview 6, the table name was basically duplicated. It was always clear what table we're referring to because it's actually implicit from the table permission declaration. So there was no need to put the explicit table reference here. So that's now gone, basically making the whole role payload much more readable. And then one other thing, which is also really significant in terms of impact, is that for tables, partitions are now emitted at the end of the file rather than at the beginning. Which is why we basically see the entire partition for this table disappearing. But if we scroll down all the way to the bottom, we can see that this is actually where it's moved to. So the new standard order is to have columns, measures first, and then partitions last. And previously partitions were first. And as you can see, I happen to know that stuff, but anyone can basically just sort of go through those pull requests here and just look at the changes left to right to basically infer, what's changed in terms of TMDL. Let me just, I mean, as you can see, there's quite a lot of stuff here, but I think it's quite repetitive now. Everything I've mentioned so far is just coming up again because we're going through various tables here. So yeah, so that's the idea in terms of tracking changes. If I go to the previous version, let's go backwards. We can see preview 6 didn't have any changes whatsoever. This one down here is just injected from tabular editor. Preview 6 just had lots of internal changes, basically, but no output changes. Preview 5, on the other hand, was also a really big deal because the extension changed. So TMDL was released with the .tmd extension originally, and in Preview 5 it was changed to TMDL. And that's now the default output. And I do remember quite a few people who were wondering about that because it wasn't explicitly announced at the time. And I think, yeah, so as you can see, there's nothing else here apart from this thing injected from Tabular Editor. So the extension change is really the main one to be aware of from back then. Preview 4, I believe, had a few more things. 20 files. Oh, yes. Yeah, this is a funny one because those are all white space changes. So to the naked eye, you can't actually tell what's different here. This is just about line breaks. And I think, yeah, so that was that. So not super exciting, actually. I think I'm thinking of Preview 3, to be honest. 18 files. Yes, exactly. So that's the one. In fact, I was still very much involved on this one. So there was a breaking change from 2 to 3 with respect to how object names were emitted. Previously, we had excessive use of those quote characters when there was actually no good reason for it. So Preview 3 simplified the syntax and ended up emitting quotes only when there was white space in the name. But for any other characters, anything that's not white space, there is no quoted name needed anymore. And ultimately, you will probably agree, makes readability much better. And particularly down here, you can see that quite nicely. And a similar thing to what we saw with roles and permissions. Preview 2 had those redundant table and column references for perspectives. They all got dropped in Preview 3. Without us losing anything, we ended up with a substantially leaner syntax for perspectives. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, so names and perspectives, if I remember correctly. Preview 2 had quite a few things relating to white space yet again. And then that's pretty much it. Yeah, so the initial Preview 1 emitted quite a bit of extra white space, as in quite a bit of vertical white space between different objects, and that all got removed again to actually make it more readable and more succinct. So that was, I think, as you can see, that was the only sort of notable difference back going from 1 to 2, basically. So yeah, hopefully that's useful for some folks. I'm definitely going to maintain this moving forward, and I am expecting, as I said in the beginning, for Preview 8 to be very significant in terms of further syntax changes. But that should be the last one, and then I think we should be on a really good path to, at some point, I don't know any dates, but at some point in the future, to actually see TMDL in GA and in other products, like you mentioned developer mode, obviously, right? That's the one big gap right now, where we're desperately waiting to see TMDL. But you can see there's a lot of evolution going on here, and that's being pushed quite a lot at this point to get TMDL to a really stable state, so that it can then ultimately end up in developer mode and elsewhere. Yeah. Do we have any questions from anyone?
Yeah, everyone is free to write questions now. So far, Donald has said yes. He didn't much TMDL since July, so same here, same as me. And it's amazing to see how much it's still evolved and that there is changing. So thank especially you as in person, Matthias, for developing this, because of course it's a Microsoft feature, but I think everyone knows that you are a lot behind it. And this is something, yeah, that's really great, because since developer mode, I'm quite used to use the BIMs and report files and all this stuff, because it's supported, and there are companies that cannot use Power BI tools and no external tools at all. And there, at some clients, I have these issues, and I'm really looking forward to have the better readability of TMDL like in default, and still keeping, of course, the tools for projects where I can use them, because there are use cases
Mm-hmm.
that will
Yeah.
be even better than.
Hopefully it's not long now.
Yeah.
Will be a massive milestone for TMDL to be the default for dev mode and other
Yeah.
tools. Absolutely.
There are lots of people waiting for this one. And yeah, so I still keep the 1 minute open for if any questions occur, and but already can see how amazing it is to see someone telling the history of something with GitHub. Actually, I think it's so. I, if I would expect it from anyone, I would expect it from you, because you're like Mr. GitHub, and it's like, okay, let's wrap up the history of the year. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, there couldn't be hardly any better use case to show in GitHub. Okay.
Indeed,
And
absolutely. And it will probably make sense for us to continue this in the new year, once we've got the preview 8 out. And at that point, I would then also encourage everyone who's sort of being a bit hesitant right now to check out TMDL, because there shouldn't be. It should be very, very stable at that point, and should definitely make a lot of sense checking it out and starting to invest into it.
Yeah, I posted the link because it's really worth to see the history and the development. It's very good, explainable. And so then thanks to everyone. Thanks to you, Matthias, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll see you next year.
Absolutely. Yeah, same to you. And everyone else who was following and watching and commenting. Always great to get that kind of feedback.
Then thanks for attending.